Welcome everyone to Plastic Arts Podcast. Today we have a very special episode here. We have the founders of Vox Pop Games. We have Charles Yu and Marc Anthony Rodriguez. I appreciate you guys being on the show. Thanks for being here.
It's an honor.
Thank you very much, Alfonso. Thank you.
Thank you. And so I told you a little bit before we started recording, just hearing about this idea with Vox Pop Games, I instantly have a million questions, and it sounds like such a great idea. I'm a small streamer myself. I talk to a lot of indie devs, and so the idea of merging these two platforms and kind of removing the barriers, letting them communicate, work together directly, I love that idea. And so I'd love to kind of pick your brain and hear about, what's going on there at Vox Pop Games. And so if you can kind of give me a quick intro into if somebody's hearing for Vox Pop for the first time, what can they expect? What kind of platform are you building?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea behind Vox Pop is to create an indie-centric platform that doesn't just provide a marketplace for games, but also gives indie devs a tool to sort of market themselves. One of the biggest problems with independent games is just the complete lack of any kind of marketing budget. Many indie devs are solo devs, even small studios don't really have the kind of advertising money that big studios would typically use. And so what we really wanted to do was create a way that independent developers could market by leveraging their future earnings as opposed to money they may not have in their pocket at the moment. And the way we arrived at doing that was creating a profit sharing system. The way this works is every developer designates a percentage of their sale, which will go to user incentives, right? And this will pay out to everybody who helps market their games. So recommending their games to their friends, seeding the files on the platform because we are peer-to-peer, or getting users on board that then buy those files. Anytime something like that happens, everyone who had a place in the chain gets a percentage of the game's sale. Now, you don't have to be an influencer to participate. If you're just somebody who loves any particular game and you think it's underrated, you want to support this artist, you can still share in the game's success by promoting it to your friends or anybody you meet online. However, obviously, one of the biggest groups to benefit are streamers, right? After all, streamers are constantly streaming to an audience. And what I'm sure you can relate to is streamers who stream indie games, just like the indie game developers themselves, often have trouble breaking through. Right. The most popular games to stream are typically, first of all, multiplayer and competitive. That's just a resource drain that many independent developers can't tackle. But even then, people prefer to see the kinds of games that they engage in. So anything by Activision Blizzard, a lot of free-to-play games on there, and if you want to stream independent titles, especially any visual novels or puzzle games or just any other kinds of games that don't film well, it is a huge, huge handicap. Obviously, though, these kind of streamers and Let's Players who are willing to tackle indie games have always been invaluable parts of the independent developer community. And so what I wanted to do with Vox Pop is just create a more formal way to link these two sides of the community together. So everyone can profit.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that sounds great. I want to get more into Vox Pop, but also what brought you guys to this actual platform, building this platform, starting it from the ground up. It seems your actual backlog or your experience with both Marc and Charles, you're well known or in depth in the industry. You've tackled other industries as well, and you're kind of bringing that knowledge over to Vox Pop. So I want to kind of dig into that and kind of then we can see really the brains behind it and how I'm really looking forward to this ambitious project. So we got with Charles here. From your LinkedIn profile, you have quite a lengthy list here, and so what started you on that path towards game design, and what did you dabble in before coming to Vox Pop?
What started me on the path is just playing video games as a kid. I don't know, Pokemon. I've loved video games since I was a kid. As I mentioned, Pokemon is very close to me. What got me started looking at independent games specifically, though, was actually this old Flash game called Every Day the Same Dream. It's I can't describe it too in depth here without completely ruining what made the game powerful for me. It's free, everyone can check it out, right? But what I thought was so cool about that game is that it sort of turns side-scrolling conventions against you, right? So if you just keep walking right and interacting with every object that you can, which is what would be typical for like a side-scrolling adventure game, what's going to end up happening is you get out of bed, you get dressed, you get stuck in traffic for a little bit, and then you go to work at a cubicle and you wake up in bed again, right? And that will keep repeating until you find ways to sort of rebel against this programming. And while that game might not hold up as well today, you know, a decade and a half after it was originally released, um, it was the first game that really got me thinking about the language of video games, of video games as an art that communicates something to the player. Up until that point, I had never really thought about all the intrinsic rules to video games that I just sort of accepted were true. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, it
And
was the first kind of challenge to the whole idea as itself.
exactly.
Always go right.
Right. Yeah, we're used to that, where we were kind of trained in that early on.
Yeah, and one of the ways to rebel in Every Day the Same Dream is to just go left. It sounds so stupid when you say it like that, but like I'm sure you can understand. You know, it's the way this language is communicated, and that's what really made me want to start making my own video games, and that's really what made me start thinking about video games as a medium of expression. Um, as for what got me started on Vox Pop, that's because, as you might have seen from my LinkedIn profile, I actually majored in video games in college, in game design in college. And from my exposure there and from my time releasing my own games on platforms like Itch, it really woke me up to how difficult it is to make a living as an independent game designer. I really struggled. I won't go too into depth here, but I just didn't see a future for myself as as an independent game designer in terms of a career, right? And I more than anything, I wished there was some form of support, right? Some way to market without having money in my pocket to burn right away. And I figured, well, if I can't succeed as an independent game designer now in this current climate, the next best thing I can do is to try and make this tool so that other people can succeed, or so that I can succeed in this field in the future.
Gotcha. Yeah, let me send that same question over to Mark. And you touched on some great ideas, especially with just that industry alone, getting known or trying to be, trying to make a name for yourself, trying to have your game noticed. It's really ripe for disruption, for improvement. And so it's a great idea. I feel like that's where VoxPop can kind of fill that void. But with you, Mark, how did you find yourself getting into the industry, and what were some of your early inspirations for following that path?
My foray into the industry was in the AAA market space. I started with Rockstar Games in early 2005. Sort of grew the ranks there through product operations and game analytics. My background is not as game designer per se. It's more of a philosophical nature. So I graduated from State University of New York with a philosophy degree. I learned the ins and outs of just game theory. A lot of my background was in game theory and gamification of our existence and our daily lives. So I bounced around a lot to many of the AAA studios. In a couple of previous podcasts, I talked about my former life in, Japanese game design, building the ARC platform for Perfect World Entertainment, eventually moving on to game streaming. So the streaming markets for Disney Plus and Disney streaming services, learning all the ins and outs of how to run a back-end system through AWS for video streaming with the best of the best at MLBAM and BAM Tech. And then I sort of, I feel like I hit a wall and I needed some kind of clarity in my life. I wanted to find something. I started working on my consulting agency, Grummelworks, and Charles and I met up on LinkedIn, and I saw this amazing idea, like you stated earlier, Alfonso. It is an amazing, amazing tool for independent game developers. Everyone is struggling now. You know, we're in this sort of post-COVID era, but it was always a with the independent game developer. You need to, self-market, self-promote, or rely on a big name publisher to see some validity, and then they end up owning your IP. What we're trying to do here is unlike anything else. So I pretty much signed on automatically and told Charles, like, this is the next phase in my career. If there's anything that I can do with my vast experience in AAA marketing, it's let you know that we're never going to follow those tropes, specifically with our marketing and our everything that we have to do. We have to do something out of the box. And just this client is completely out of the box and completely new and a little bit innovative, I feel. Yeah, that's pretty much my go-to and where we're coming from. I know that everything that is built for AAA is from the ground up taken from independent games in one way, shape, or form. So I don't want us to have these ideas that Charles had so eloquently explained, these tropes in independent games, go unnoticed and go unseen. They need to have the attention, the market share. I don't want to call us boutique-like, but we are offering a platform and a voice for those developers that are just, throwing up their games on any other platform, Steam and Itch and all these other, there's millions of platforms right now, and just praying for something to hit. We're giving them an avenue to basically have streamers support and create a community around their very small games or their, potentially huge mega success.
And one thing that I feel Mark may have glossed over is that he's bringing immense experience to the table. Groma Works was a talent discovery company for independent game designers. So he's actually been in the scene, both the indie scene, the AAA scene. He's gone through launching a whole other platform. And so I think Mark is the perfect partner I could have ever asked for.
Yeah, I was trying to be a little bit humble in my speech,
right?
But my deal here is to support the community, do community outreach as best we can. We have an amazing team with Vox Pop Holly Welch, and Alicia Augustine, Vox Pop Alici. Charles and I are really, we're a lean, mean fighting machine, and we're trying to launch this startup client into this new world.
One thing I think you noticed earlier as well is that after college I went to work at a venture capitalist firm, Danhua Venture Capital, DHVC. And the reason I went to do that, the way I saw it, it wasn't a turn away from game design. As I mentioned to you, I didn't really see a future for myself as a game designer. And I knew I had to make some sort of tool, if not for everyone else, then at least for myself. And I figured, well, what's going to be necessary is funding. If I want to start a company, I'm going to have to try and get funding. And so I joined DHVC to try and get a look at how venture capital firms sort of operate behind the scenes. And I think that really gave me a lot of insight, not just in sort of speaking to investors, but also what's important to consider when starting a business. Because, at the end of the day, we do need to keep running.
Yeah, that was my initial intention, was to kind of parlay into the venture capitalism part of it, because I feel like that's a strong starting point to really have that understanding as a company. I mean, it's a lot to get people to sign on board, but to trust the fact that you have that experience, you have that knowledge, I think you're bringing something really unique to the table.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that was another thought I had, was along your experience with both of you, did you see that at one point did you see that kind of like that void open up to for disruption, for building something new and kind of filling that void with VoxPop?
The way I see it, the void has sort of just been unfilled for a really long time. I mean, look, when people write about how indie games were booming in the late 2000s and early 10s, right? And they look at games like Braid, and Yet It Moves, these huge like breakout successes. They're really overlooking the fact that the majority of indie games weren't breakout successes, right? Even now, we still have occasional breakout successes. Games will go viral, There's a fluke hit like the Untitled Goose Game or Getting Over It, right? It's just something that instantly captures the public imagination, but really, it's not consistent. If you want to make a living making video games, it's indie games, right? It's actually quite tough. Even indie game designers who've had a huge, big success often have trouble making follow-up successes. Daisuke Amaya, the man who designed Cave Story, has actually made, I think, about 5 games since, the most recent one being Caro Story. But the only thing that makes him any money is remakes of Cave Story.
Important.
So they port Cave Story to a new platform, re-release it every once in a while, because none of his other games have ever captured the public imagination quite the same way. And this is someone who had a huge success, right? So the way I see it, it wasn't so much that something changed about the market that really created this gap. It's more like the gap was never quite addressed. And it's not something that a lot of people who haven't tried to make a living making indie games would have really noticed.
This is more about the content creation. So we look at the community and we're saying this is about content creation for streamers, for game designers, developers, for content creators who chop up videos and play let's plays on YouTube, for Twitch streamers, live Twitch streamers. We're looking at it from a perspective of the content is a waterfall, and it's an endless waterfall of things, and you're vying for the attention of everyone, every second of every moment of every day. What we're doing now is trying to sort of navigate that water in a very small canoe with a very lean team, and make sure that the content that we're curating is boutique and wholly unique to what we're trying to accomplish with the overall platform. It's just sharing artistry to as many people as possible in as many ways as possible. Go ahead, Charles. Sorry.
Following from that thought, actually, I will say, while I believe the problem, to a greater or lesser extent, has actually really been there for as long as small content creators have existed on the internet, right? I will say what really made me aware of it was when in high school and college I started seeing more and more small YouTubers and small streamers talk about how much they're struggling to keep their channels afloat, right? And the rise of platforms like Patreon and Ko-fi, which really showed me that a lot people want to support the artists that they enjoy. I really see it as a way we can bolster each other as well, right? Because I talked earlier about content creators being able to share in the games they promote, but that's because a lot of indie game devs who are new, they might be a little, I don't want to say naive, but they might say like, oh, why do I gotta pay you to play my game? That's it feels unnatural. Like, are you selling out? Like, do you not care? Right. But I'm sure it's not about that, right? You got bills to pay too. Your equipment costs money. You got to keep your channel running somehow. And indie devs got to promote somehow. And that's really where this comes from.
The middle of the Venn diagram is exactly where VoxPop fits. Those overlaps are in the middle, is where our client can hopefully not be echo chambery, but more of a breakout, so that it's widening that middle ground. It's widening the ability for the content and the creation of the content for the streamer base and for the game developers to not have to solely rely on actually signing contracts for publishing to then get their IP pretty much run by some other company, and not the designer, director, developer, blood, sweat, and tears indie game dev. We want to sort of bridge that gap. We want to become that channel on that avenue for like that one-stop shop, so that everyone could talk with everyone together, whether it's on Discord or Twitter or wherever we're doing our sort of discourse. Right now we're on Discord. We're trying to get everyone involved in conversating and sharing amongst each other organically the profits for things that you're spending time on. Time is money. The resource that we can never get back in this world is time. So right now, I can thank you for your time, and it's money that we're doing. So we're exchanging time for money. We want to make sure everyone is aware of those key terms and those key phrases and those key. Go ahead, Charles. Sorry, I know you're going to jump in.
No, I was just going to say, speaking of time, we've taken a lot of your time on this question, so let's keep going.
Hey,
sorry, we're rambling again.
No, you're fine. I mean, I can tell the genius behind these thoughts, so it's like I take a back seat because I just really want to learn. No, and you touched on some great ideas. I mean, I think there's a lot of you just don't know what you don't yet know kind of thing. Whether it's an indie dev or your streamer, you don't realize the problems that arise or the real hurdles that you have to face with marketing, with communicating. Yeah, it's a whole can of worms, and I like the idea of VoxPop kind of coming in and helping to remove those barriers, connect people. I like the idea of, it seems like from the heart of it, you're trying to help indies retain their identity with what they're creating, more creative control, and kind of create just more of those things that they might be able to if they go on to whatever said publisher or whatever said platform. Like, it seems like your idea is allowing that indie to shine, those streamers to shine. So talking about the start point of Vox, and then when you decide to add on those team members that you have.
Okay, so well, Marc and I, we can't handle everything, obviously, and so naturally we've been blessed with two great team members that Marc mentioned earlier. Elisi, our engineer, he's been wonderful. We picked him up, I think, also towards the end of 2019. To help round out our platform, build features that we need. And then our social media manager, Holly Welch, she has been responsible for doing a lot of the visual content that we display everywhere. She's helped manage our blog on our website, as well as all of our socials, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. Both of them are incredibly passionate for the space, incredibly talented, and incredibly hardworking, and we're pleased to have them.
What are some of those challenges that you knew you'd have to face, and how did you start to tackle those with starting VoxPop?
Challenges that we knew we'd have to face. Finding ways to get the message out there, right? So it's one thing to have a good idea, but that's not enough, right? You got to make people aware that you have a good idea. And one thing I quickly learned working at a VC firm is that literally every entrepreneur walking in says, we'll promote on social media.
Sure.
That's it. That's their plan. Well, we'll go on Instagram and everyone will love us, right? That's why hiring a dedicated social media manager is one of the first things we did. On the face of it, you might say, well, you don't necessarily need a social media manager. Everyone kind of uses Facebook and Twitter and Insta, right? Like you wouldn't necessarily think of that as being one of the most critical roles that you need a team member for. But I'll be honest with you, I've always been kind of an introvert, and I don't fully understand all of the workings and rules, sort of the unspoken rules on various social media platforms. That's why I'm so thankful to have Holly. And she, Marc, and I, we can bounce ideas off of each other on how to promote, various promotions that we're running. In fact, it was her idea to run the games giveaway that we're doing right now. Everyone who signs up for our beta has a chance to win one of 3 amazing independent games. But so promoting on social media is one of the challenges I always knew we'd have to face. These are just kind of sort of the business challenges,
right?
That we foresaw in advance. I know they might seem a little boring compared to the big picture stuff.
Sure.
Big picture, yeah.
I will say that I could also talk a little bit about how the pandemic has sort of affected us.
Yeah.
If you'd like to hear about that. Thankfully, no one on our team has been sick. But that does not mean we haven't been impacted by COVID-19 as well. Because one thing we noticed was that the support infrastructure kind of broke down. So a lot of the services that we depend on to release didn't quite work the same way, especially customer support for these companies. Often some of them have shut down their customer support lines entirely,
Mm,
and a lot of times we still haven't gotten a response out of PayPal,
really? Wow.
right? So these payment services like PayPal and Square, and our web hosting like AWS, and all the other small services that we use that's necessary for our company to build, um, things have broken down a little bit. A lot of the review processes have slowed down. Customer support sometimes isn't there, and combine this with the fact that news about COVID-19 has also flooded everyone's feeds.
Sure.
Right, it's so much harder to get people's attention in this this space when the information economy is sort of dominated by the platform. Uh, these are all the things that I think a lot of people probably wouldn't even consider when they talk about how businesses have been impacted by COVID-19. But as a small business, we don't have reserves like big companies do, and we do rely on a lot of this infrastructure that big companies can afford to ignore. And so we have been slowed down, even though nobody, thank God, on our team has fallen sick.
Yeah, we've had to postpone. Charles did a great blog write up of we moved our date from 420. We're still floating. We're not going to be able to give any idea or timelines because everything is a day by day, just like the rest of the world.
Yeah,
We are
sadly, as I mentioned. Oh, pardon.
No, we are targeting things internally, but in the worst case scenario that we can do, or the worst thing we can do again, is announce and then blow that date because of some extra, circumstance that is completely out of our control. This postponement from April 20th was we were working up until the 11th hour to get this thing out, but it would have been unfair for our community, our users, our streamers, our developer partners, the indie game devs that we're so often trying to tout as this is what we're here to support you, and then we can't because of X.
Right.
So that was a crazy thing. So go ahead, Charles.
If I may go on another minor tangent,
Oh, yeah,
I'll
go
keep
for
it
it.
short, I promise.
Yeah.
The pandemic, though, I think has also reinforced to me how important it is for indie devs to have a tool to market themselves like this. There's a lot of articles written about how spending on video games has increased in the pandemic, how people are playing more video games, buying more video games. But one thing you'll notice pretty much across the board is it's big games. It's Animal Crossing, it's Doom, it's games that have huge marketing dollars behind them, that oftentimes games that were already popular, or anticipated rather, because they hadn't released yet, before the pandemic happened. If you're a small independent creator and you're coming out now, like you want it to ship now, there's no way you can compete with that. People are buying games they've already heard of because the pandemic has crowded out all the other messaging. And
how do you compete with, as soon as you open any game feed, any Facebook page, any Instagram, any social media page, and
Animal Crossing memes,
yeah, it just
all the way down.
And also COVID-19 updates. So it's becoming like its own, I guess, advertising vector. It's an advertising vector that no one was ready for, and no one could honestly compete with. You're not going to compete with death, and you're not going to compete with Animal Crossing. So
it's the new Death and Taxes, basically.
Yeah. Well, that's a game that's an independent game that launched on Steam, and I've been trying to talk to those devs. We're trying to that game is amazing. Death and Taxes, even though they're not on Vox Pop, I would love for that team to be on our platform to support them as much as they can. They're on Steam. They're doing what they got to do. How do we do that? And when we ship, how do we get the attention back on to what our cause is?
Right.
Doing things like this. Spending some marketing, spending capital, but being very, very cautious about that because we don't want to scream into the ocean. I'm not trying to be, Go ahead, Charles.
And one way to illustrate my point, on Reddit, what's top right now, if you scroll down, it's Borderlands 3, Cyberpunk 2020, 2077. Sorry, I don't.
Right now we're living Cyberpunk 2020.
Yeah. Cyberpunk 2077. Skyrim again. There are 2 Skyrim posts. Overwatch and Animal Crossing again. More Animal Crossing. Minecraft as well. Right. All games that were big before the virus. It's not a great time to be shipping new content right now. It was already tough, but it's only gonna get tougher. And
And
that's another thing. People talk about how spending on games increased during the recession from the housing crisis, right? But again, all big games, all AAA. People, whenever there's a recession, marketing trumps even more. It's even more important, sadly.
marketing,
Anyway,
marketing.
tangent over, I promise.
Yeah. Marketing spend over. No. I wanted to sort of, piggyback off this. It's a great topic, and I don't want to be too COVID heavy. We went to PAX East. We were exhibiting on the show floor with a couple of our partners. We were trying to get the word out and onboard new partners. And this is like the beginnings of the COVID-19 sort of spread. So this was probably the last show that's ever going to be a live show that I've been to, and it was the lightest show that I've ever seen. I've been to dozens of event trade shows. I've been to everything, PAX East, PAX Prime, where you guys are in Washington. I've been to Tokyo Game Show. I've been to it all, and the one thing I saw was it wasn't necessarily a fear of what was going to come in less than a couple of weeks. It was the not being able to understand that a lot of these properties that were in sort of the backlatted area for the mini booth and mega booth were going to have such a tremendously hard time now when they're trying to ship. So now we're talking to people that we were talking to a couple of months ago, like everything was hunky-dory, and they are like have return times of not being able to get to an email for 3 to 4 weeks. Like I'm hitting auto reply messages just for regular life, not for partnership, just for, hey, how are you doing? How's your family? How are your kids? I dealt with something my wife and I lost our son during, not COVID related, but we lost our son. My wife miscarried at 5 months. Our son, Leandro, just getting normal life, normalcy back, to try and, have his memory. And my son that's here, he just celebrated his 3rd birthday a couple days ago, just trying to get normalcy in our lives. I wanted to talk about just what have we been playing? What have you been playing, Alfonso? What have you been doing? How have you been doing? Just give us some overlay just so we could have a dialogue of how you have been and how this has sort of affected you.
As far as on my end, and I appreciate you talking about that. I really that sounds terrible, and I'm sorry for for your loss, and that sounds extremely heavy. And that once again, why I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your lives to talk to me in the first place. I share the same sentiments where it's COVID taking over everything, and really that's where games kind of shine. You can kind of tear away from some of the realities and spend your time in games and online communities. I mean, I'm the same boat where I'm just trying to play more and play online more and also conversate more. I mean, with me, really, I've been playing a lot of City Skylines. That's kind of my jam, is just like getting lost in those sims. I love that kind of thing. But yeah, and you touch on some great points where when you're an indie trying to branch out, I mean, whether or not this stuff is happening with COVID, it's already hard enough to get your game out there. And so that's really the benefit, I imagine, with joining with something like Vox Pop, where they can help take over that that weight of just kind of, because you're right, you're screaming into a void. But if you can have some kind of help, and those industry connections and helping you build that market, because it's hard to get out there.
And help really is the right word. I did mention earlier that Coffee and Patreon and were some of the biggest inspirations behind Vox Pop, because people do want to support the creation of this kind of stuff that they love, the creation of the content they love. And I really just saw this platform as a way that everyone can participate.
Yeah, I agree. And especially, I think there's a huge demand for, I want to say that's why streaming has taken, streamers and personalities have skyrocketed, because people see the face, they see the personality, and they connect with that. And I want more indies to kind of take charge as well. I want to see indies behind the screen. I want to see what they've gone through, talk to them. I feel like people also want that connection, and that helps to build their trust in supporting them and funding a project and being on board, is seeing that person, and seeing the blood, sweat, and tears behind a project like that.
And that's the another thing that I hope VoxPop can accomplish is, I know that a number of streamers have spoken about feeling like they've been pigeonholed into doing certain things. or like having some online or not even just streamers, but like I noticed it with less players and streamers because I'm a gamer, obviously. But a lot of online personalities have spoken about feeling like there's this sort of invisible pressure to become what they're not. It's the only way to stay viable, to win new viewers, right? I hope that we can create a system where it becomes possible to do the things you love and not just be forced to chase trends because that's the only way to stay relevant.
Gotcha.
And we have a bunch of tools. I know Charles was sort of I guess tiptoeing around it in a odd sense with Patreon and Coffee. We're trying to do something inherently within our platform. So we announced it a couple podcasts ago about the micro investment engine. I wanted Charles to just touch on that a little bit before we just switch topics real quick. Charles, go ahead.
Okay, so another aspect of what I was saying in trying to share in a game's success is I wanted to create a better form of crowdfunding. Kickstarter isn't like dead or anything like that, but when it comes to kickstarting a game, you really better have like an audience already, or it's not going to work out. This is understandable because I don't have the statistics on hand, sadly, but it was crazy high. It was something like 80% of games that meet their fundraising goals on Kickstarter never get finished. And in addition to that, right, I don't think that's obviously gamers have lost faith because of that, but I don't think that's necessarily developer malice or greed or anything like that, right? Because it's what a lot of people, a lot of developers too, especially, don't realize is that every single tier you introduce, you're introducing more work for yourself. And that the reward tier itself, the work that you have to do to reach these like goals on Patreon and on Kickstarter, right, are themselves cost you money and time. And you'll get to a point where you're making back less than it costs to do the thing, right? So that's assuming you even have the skill set to do it. So like, let's say I'm making a game, right? I'm a game designer, and maybe I'm a great game designer. Do I have the skill set to design merchandise, to manufacture that merchandise? How am I going to ship it to everybody, right? Even if I do nothing but promise in-game bonuses, I still have to make those in-game bonuses.
Yeah.
Let's say, there's I say, okay, you pledge me $100 and I will make you an NPC in this game. You got to model that NPC. Maybe you got to voice it, right? You got to script it to do something. Probably nobody wants an NPC that just stands around and does nothing.
Right? Hanging out in the corner of the fake world.
Right.
A lot of extra work. So people end up introducing all this extra work to themselves. They end up expanding the scope of the game beyond what they're able to tackle. It breaks the game and it breaks their trust, people's trust in your game. I want to create a way that you can fundraise without having to introduce all this extra stuff to you, right? But consumers also want something more tangible than just your promise, right?
Right.
And so that's the idea behind the micro investment engine. Basically, it's the developers can sell, to draw an analogy, they can sell stock in their games. And everybody who's purchased a share of this game by donating, every time that game sells, they get a portion of the game's sale directly, right? Now, this does two things. One, it creates a way to fund the production of your game for the developer. It creates a way to fund the production of your game that doesn't introduce extra workload and doesn't necessarily require that you have a huge pre-existing audience. Obviously, a huge pre-existing audience would be a huge benefit. But the way we'd have it set it up is there would be essentially a market view. So even if you have no audience, there's still visibility. Now, obviously not guaranteed. Visibility doesn't equal success, but you're at least visible somewhere, right? For the consumer, it allows them another opportunity to share in the game's success, to be part of that success story, right? Because now you're invested in the game doing well. And when the game does well, you do well as well. And two, it provides some measure of accountability because now you also control part of the game's revenue. And they really don't make money if you don't make money.
just to finalize a little bit more of what Charles was saying, what I was mentioning about the sort of stock market within the stock market of the Steam cards and stuff like that. It's not exactly like that. The micro investment engine is a way for users to get a sense of, like you said, ownership. If someone is buying a share in this, they're going to automatically want to promote that game.
Right.
It's another marketing share. It's actually a marketing share more than an ownership share. So you're like, hey, look at this awesome game that I invested in this three guys in Idaho, or some one guy in the middle of France, or just any. We are a although we're Brooklyn born, we are international. We have developers from all across the globe, all different backgrounds, all different culture types, just speaking through the artistry of games, speaking through the voice of games. And we want that voice to be as strong as ever. And money talks, and BS walks. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we're able to provide the vision and the foresight of, hey, we want this to be, all of the platform partners that we have now will continue to get revenue and continue to get shine, as long as they're with us, as long as we're partnering. And even after, like I said, I was promoting a game that's not even on our platform. We want games to succeed just in general, because if they succeed, the industry succeeds, the community succeeds. Charles, go ahead. Sorry.
One thing I want to clarify, we're not trying to promise that somebody with no audience and no show or anything like that can somehow become rich just off of this. We're not advertising a get rich quick scheme, but this is a way to share in the success and to take a piece, just enough to be worth your time to promote. Does that make sense? So we're not trying to say, quit your day job, just invest in indie games, right? If you're a streamer, that might be possible because you have an audience, right? But if you're, a regular gamer, you're probably not going to be able to make this your living, but you can make a little bit more money. You can put it towards your next game, or you can just put it towards, your next meal, right? It's just a little bit of extra money so that it's worth your time to support the things you love. That's what it is, really.
Gotcha.
Rather than just waiting for a code to show up after 3 years of development and then forgetting all about it and having it buried in your list.
That's the thing. Yeah, I mean, you touch on some great ideas, and I remember hearing this same kind of stuff with Kickstarter becoming so popular, is that there's just not ownership, but it's like you kind of trust the developers in whatever state to actually develop the game in the first place, to take whatever millions of dollars potentially they earn, and to there's a promise there to hopefully you get back what you put your money towards. And yeah, you get a copy of the game, but there's also, I love the idea of some kind of percentage ownership over what's being made, and that helps that community back and forth. You mentioned with streamers having a little bit more of a way to make money, just promoting that game in the first place, and then it goes back and forth. It's a great idea, and I feel like that's something Kickstarter, those kind of companies were lacking, in that they just didn't have that option, that ability.
And following that, it's I imagine that maybe you have a number of viewers who are reticent to donate because they feel like they'll get nothing, but if they can buy a game and support you at the same time, they might be more willing to do that.
Yeah, and so one aspect is really merging with VoxPop, the streaming side of it and then the developing side of it. It seems like one of my first thought was it's almost like where Twitch meet something like Steam, where you can kind of create this just one-stop shop where you can jump in, play a game, try a game, watch streamers. Is that where you're hoping to take, VoxPop, where it's just one entity? You can watch streams there, you can play games there. Is that, possibly, where this is going?
I would like it to go there eventually, perhaps, but let's be clear where it is. That's not where it is now. We are platform agnostic, right? It's promotion of these games is basically you link back to your own page, and then there'll be a list of games you recommend to your followers, or you can link to the game specifically, right? With a code is one thing we like, or they can be a code that your viewer puts in to say this person directed me here, and so you can do that on really any platform. You can promote the game on YouTube. You can promote it on Twitch. You can, in fact, all of our current streaming partners are on Twitch. Silver.tv, wherever, right? We want to make it the broadest tool possible so that all streamers and all developers can take full advantage of it. While yes, we would love to do streaming in ourselves, I think one thing I definitely learned as a game designer is the importance of scoping.
Gotcha.
You need to figure out what's most important, what's the core functionality that's critical to you, and we're going to focus on that.
I also wanted to touch on what Charles is playing. I know we've been amazingly busy, but you have to take 5 minutes to play at least one thing. So Charles, what have you been?
I haven't had the most time to play, to be honest. But
so you're still doing your dailies? No more dailies? No more ESO dailies?
No more dailies. Confession time. One thing I have done is reinstall Skyrim and mod it.
Yeah.
It's all reliable,
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm exhausted because we're working on this platform, right? You have to understand, I very rarely actually have time to sit down and play for any extended period of time. And sometimes I'm just exhausted and I want to turn my brain off because to go through something I've already done like 500,000 times. So I actually started by reinstalling Morrowind and I forgot how much I hate it.
Oh, really? I think we hit 15-year anniversary, I think, with Morrowind, right? Or was that Oblivion? Yeah. It was Morrowind.
No,
Oblivion
15 years.
Morrowind was 2003.
Gotcha.
No, 2003 was Blood Moon expansion. Morrowind was 1999.
I'm gonna date myself and say Oblivion was my jam because that was when I started at Rockstar. So for me, I'm gonna sort of self-answer. So when I'm in between talking with Charles right now, I'm in the Brooklyn office, and Charles is in California. We are sort of on completely different. I know you're in Washington State, Alfonso. So I'm working, day and night. I'm at like sort of a 3 a.m. spec. So when I'm pinging him at 3 a.m., I'm trying to fight off my wife from the Switch because she's all in with Animal Crossing. That's sort of our, therapeutic. It's a therapy game that she's using now. She named her island after our son who passed away, and it's a therapy thing for me. When I wrangle the Switch away from her for short bursts, I've been playing Streets of Rage 4.
Oh yeah.
I managed to go through a couple of playthroughs on that. I'm trying to desperately get my brother to sign on so we could play some online co-op and try and go through it in one set. But it's short burst games like that. It brought me back to nostalgia. I needed a little bit of a beat 'em up after a frustrating day, and masking up and going out and sort of seeing what's happening in the street just to get like a loaf of bread and a gallon of milk,
right,
and then come in and then shower and then disinfect my groceries. I sort of want to beat things, so do it for 15 minutes, pass a mission, and then the Switch gets taken away by my wife and I continue with my day. That's pretty much
more on brand, though.
Go ahead, John.
More on brand, though. The most recent indie game that I played, which I absolutely love and everyone should play it, is Baba Is You.
Oh yeah, I tried that. It's very hard.
You played it? Yeah, it's great. I love games that puzzle games are so hard to design. When you, like a core puzzle mechanic has to be. Stop me if it goes on too long.
Go for it.
So, any game you want to design for elegance and complexity, right? Fewest possible rules to achieve the largest possible game states. But with puzzle games, this is especially important. The best puzzle games have some unifying mechanic, which is really easy to understand, but it's so tough to make a puzzle mechanic that you can extrapolate to all these things, which is why a lot of puzzle games like The Witness or Cube, which aren't bad games, don't get me wrong, kind of get complexity addiction towards the end of the game and just stack on more mechanics that don't, add as much to the game. And there are other games that Thomas Was Alone, which is genuinely one of my favorites, right? But the problem with Thomas Was Alone is its core mechanic doesn't scale very well. So it's fantastic when you've got two characters to control, but once you get to the end of the game, this isn't really huge spoilers, but there's a character called Team Jump, which is like 8 separate tiny characters, and having to switch between all of them, super tedious. Baba Is You never suffers from that problem. It has one of the coolest mechanics I've ever seen in any like indie puzzle game, and it scales fantastically. It's elegant and it's complex. It's a great. I love that game. I got it on itch, but it's actually on Switch now.
Yeah.
So it's probably on Steam too. I haven't actually checked,
Yeah,
but I feel like it should be on Steam.
It should be on Vox Pop.
Someday.
Yes, one
But
day.
yeah,
soon.
Baba Is You is amazing, and you should play it.
I agree. I think I tapped out pretty early, and then I keep coming back to it and try and rework the puzzles. It's a great idea. I love. It's almost like it's not really coding, but it's like you're developing the rules within the game, and that's how the game functions. It's hard to explain, but it's very unique, and I love that. I love these indie devs, taking these chances and seeking out these just complete changes on the whole idea. And I feel like with Vox, are you guys trying to look for these more unique ideas? Are you really branching out to a huge umbrella of different indies? Or you're seeking out those more unique ideas?
We want to branch out to as many people as we can. Obviously, one of our main goals in doing this is supporting the growth of new weird ideas that don't necessarily have broad mass market appeal, right? But even games that are what you would call more, I don't know, traditional, or that follow more of a formula, even those games have value as well. We're not trying to be elitists here, it's easy to look at a game like Dead Cells, right, and say like, oh, this game is just like Rogue Legacy with fewer procedural, with more procedural elements, right? And say, it's just a ripoff. But the game itself does a number of things that are worth promoting. It's got an amazing art style. From an audiovisual feedback standpoint, like game feel, it's amazing, right? And the game is tuned differently. So even though when you break it down to its core aspects, okay, sure, it shares similarities with other games. That doesn't mean it's not a good game. Doesn't mean it's not worth promoting, right? So yes, we are trying to. The main group of people that we definitely want to help out is people who have these kinds of weird ideas that are tough to explain, that don't necessarily film super well, and that don't have mass market appeal. That doesn't mean we're trying to turn up our noses at devs that just want to take an existing idea and make it better.
Yeah, so the sampling platter for anyone would be our signups. So our signups give you a sort of taste of what we are trying to provide. So we have 3 games during our promotion for our beta signups, for our closed beta, that are exactly that. You have 1 game that is from Curious Visions. It's called Egg is Broken, Heart is Also, Heart is Too. You have golf, so it's Guardians of Ladino Forest. It's a sort of gun hell where you're shooting at giant golf ball monsters and then trying to get them into a golf hole in one. And then you have Quack Attack 1985 Turbo DX. It's a play on a huge arcade style slash. It's let's just say it is not for people that have epileptic tendencies. So the sampling platter from our signups alone are just what we're trying to provide. It's a tangent of think outside of the box. Think these are 3 developers. 2 of them are New York based. 1 is based in France. They're 3 separate personalities from development houses. And what we're trying to get everyone during the sign up is to appreciate like that. I'm going to be recommending golf because 1, I love golf simulation games. One of my favorite games of the past 20 years is Golf Story. And I also love out of the box, zany, crazy, meme-like games. So my recommendation list at the top tier of it is going to be that Guardians of Ladino Forest, the golf game. That is something that I want to sort of, it is going to be, you have a chance to win one of the 3 if you sign up. So I know, Alfonso, you've already signed up to, your viewers, hopefully they signed up. They're going to get a chance to win one of those 3 games and experience something that they might not have seen on Steam or anywhere else through our platform. Go ahead, Charles.
Everyone wins a game, but
Yes.
which one you win is random.
Gotcha.
Yes, yes.
That's awesome. I mean, you guys are touching on these great ideas. I loved hearing just the genesis of Vox Pop and really what you can provide to this industry and providing this place for indies to shine, for streamers to shine, and just kind of change that what we're all have been used to for the past 10 years with with crowdfunding and that kind of thing. I don't want to buy up too much of your guys' time, but I think we'll end it there. We answered a lot of these questions, and I'm super excited for where Vox Pop goes. Any down the road announcements or things we can expect to anticipate with Vox Pop?
Well, you can always keep up with our new announcements either on our site, www.voxpopgames.net, or on any of our social media accounts. Mark, do you have anything to say?
I was gonna run a quick promo, but I'm not gonna do that. All I'm gonna say is the promotion of our beta signups is key. We're almost at that sort of teetering place where we don't want to announce that we're full up, and we don't want to make extra room, but we are looking for as many people to sign up as possible. So the signups page is signups.voxpopgames.net. That would explain everything. And then we're going to be running Ask Us Anything or Ask Me Anything this Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on Twitter. That Twitter is just at Vox Pop Games.
As well, I am actually in the process of writing a development update for Vox Pop that will go live probably tomorrow. That's all I really had to say. Thank you for having us.
I appreciate it.
Yes, please.
It's been
Thank you so very, very much.
No problem. It's been a blast, and I can't wait to see where Vox Pop goes. And we're going to keep our ears open, our eyes open, and keep promoting it. And it's such a great idea.
Thank
all right.
You. Thank you.
Thank you for being on the show,
well,
guys.
have a good evening. Peace.
Take care.
You as well.